Yeah. All right. It's okay now?
Yes.
Okay. But before I start, I received some tragic news just before the share. Chaim Baruch Schreibman, he was a classmate of mine, and he was a big Talmid Chacham. He was a tzaddik. He was a person whose devotion to Torah manifests itself really in no interest in Olam Haza, in this world at all. He's an unusual type of person, and he was a person of shalom, person of peace. And today, Shabbos Tammuz, when Chaya talks about the fourth Somos, he says, "Aval emes v'hashalom ahavu." He was a person dedicated to emes. He was a person dedicated to Torah. His whole life was Torah. I don't think he cared about anything else. And he was a person that I never saw him involved in a fight or a dispute. And he was outstanding and unusual in that manner. And in a sense, we when we mourn the Beis Hamikdash, loss of the Beis Hamikdash, so we mourn the loss of, we say, it's coupled the nechama and the mourning that you have for individuals who passed away, and for the Beis Hamikdash, come together, and especially a person like him who represented Torah, who represented commitment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So him and the Beis Hamikdash were like one. So in the days when we mourn the loss of the Beis Hamikdash, which offered us the opportunity to feel close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we mourn also the losses of these people who represent the Beis Hamikdash, who their lives were expressive of complete devotion to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay. There is a machlokus. Now, Shavuos Tammuz, the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah and Tainis, a number of places discusses the four fast days that are associated and connected directly with the Churban. Tzom Revi, the fast of the fourth, that's Shavuos Tammuz, and Shavuos Tammuz. Why is it called the fast of the fourth? As we'll see soon, because Tammuz is the fourth month, counting from Nisan. So the breaking through of the walls, the psukim tell us, in the first Beis Hamikdash, it was on the 9th of Tammuz, but because we're involved in Gola Sheni and the second exile, in the second Beis Hamikdash, the Romans entered Yerushalayim on the 17th of Tammuz, and it was difficult to require the Jews to fast on both days. So it was instituted by the Chachamim, by the sages, that to fast on the 17th for both the event of the second, during the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash, which was on the 17th, and during the Babylonians penetrating the walls of Yerushalayim during the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash, and that was on the 9th of Tammuz. So, and this is the opinion of the Bavli. The Bavli's opinion was that they penetrated the walls on the 9th of Tammuz, and that's the simple reading of the Psukim in the Nevi'im. However, the Yerushalmi says something very strange. The Yerushalmi says that actually in both Batei Mikdash, the walls were penetrated, or the boundaries of Yerushalayim were penetrated on the 17th. So why does the Navi speak about the 9th of Tammuz? He says, Bilbul Cheshbonos, they were so confused as to what was taking place that because of that, they thought, they were under the impression that it was the 9th of Tammuz, that it was the 9th of Tammuz, but actually it was the 17th of Tammuz. And the Navi did not want to make it any different than the way it appeared to them. This is brought down in Tosfos and Rosh Hashanah also. So we have to understand that's very strange. Why would the Navi almost falsify the facts? Okay, it was expressive of what the people thought, but why did he write it that way? Why couldn't the Navi write it down in the manner that it actually happened, rather than in the manner it was perceived? Now, I've mentioned in the past regarding Parsha Shlach. In Parsha Shlach, Moshe Rabbeinu is told by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shlach lecha nashim, go send out men to spy out the land of Canaan. And Moshe Rabbeinu complies and sends them out. However, in Chumash Dvarim, so Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jewish people, you came to me and you told me that you told me that we should send out spies. Vayita beinai hadavar. It seemed like a good idea to me. And then the tragic outcome of the revolt against HaKadosh Baruch Hu took place. So, on one hand, if you read Parsha Shlach, you get the impression it was a command, it was a tzivui from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Jews were just complying. And in Parshas Dvarim, you get the impression that no, it wasn't a command. It was the idea of the Jewish people. Moshe approved, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as Chazal say, to resolve the stira, Shlach lecha, send if you want. I'm not telling you to send. But if you read the simple words of the pasuk, you get the impression in Parsha Shlach that God is giving a command. Okay, we could explain it differently as Chazal do, but the simple reading gives a different impression. Why is it that way? Why wasn't the Torah in Shlach more expressive of the way the facts were? But the answer is the Jewish people were so determined and so much wanted to have the spy sent out that it wasn't enough for them that God allowed it begrudgingly. They had to see it as a mitzvah. Sometimes we have situations like that. Sometimes we want a kula for a certain thing. I'm not going to go into examples. There are so many of them. We want a kula. We want a lenient ruling. And even when we get the lenient ruling, in order to add religious fervor to that lenient ruling, we try to turn it into a mitzvah. And that was the attitude of the Jewish people at that time. And the Torah wants us to understand the attitude of the Jewish people at that time. In a sense, as we read the Parsha, we become part of the group of the Jewish people at that time. and because there are lessons to be learned from the mistakes that they made. And unless we understand that we feel the feelings and emotions that led them to make such a major mistake, we won't recognize the mistake to the degree that it will prevent us from committing the same mistake in the future. So it's important for us, as we read the Torah, to understand almost as if we were there and we were part of the group. And that's, I think, what the Yerushalmi is telling us. The Navi wanted the Jews to understand. Now, very often, when a person is in a state of confusion, and they want to determine if his thinking is affected, if his loss of contact with reality is having an effect on him. So they ask him a number of questions. One of the questions they ask them is, who are you? What's your name? And they'll ask him, where are you now? Perhaps, what are you doing? And they'll ask, what's the date? Not knowing the date is sometimes a sign of confusion, and that emanates from a lack of having full contact with the details. It shows a lack of ability to think about the details of the situation one finds themselves. And sometimes, because we can't deal with the facts, because we can't deal with these situations, so we lose our ability to think and to analyze and to realize what we're going through. And I think that's what the Yerushalmi is trying to tell us, the way the Bavli records it. The Navi wanted to write it the way the people saw it, that we should understand the confusion, the inability of the Jewish people to think from Shavasa B'Tammuz until Tisha B'Av. And I want to, and in a sense, I think that this is, to a large degree, what is involved in Golus. We lose our ability. We lose our ability in Golus to think. The Rambam, in the Rambam at the beginning of Hilchos Tainis. So he starts off Hilchos Tainis discussing the laws of a fast because of impending danger, because of an attacking army that's coming to invade our area, because of the lack of rain, because of any danger that we are facing. And the Rambam says we're required to fast and to daven, and that's the mitzvah Chatzotzros, HaKadosh Baruch Hu at that time, to plead for his help. And the Rambam says that is midarkei hatshuva, that is part of the path of tshuva. However, when the Rambam discusses the 4 fast days toward the end of Hilchos Tainis, so there he says the purpose of the 4 fast days is liftoach darkei tshuva, to open the ways of tshuva, to open the pathways of tshuva. when there is an impending danger, when there's an enemy at the border, when there's no rain, when there's no food, when there's pestilence destroying the crop. So then that's our response, our spiritual response. That's midar tshuva. That's part of the path of tshuva. But regarding the 4 fast days that are associated with our gullus, with our exile, with the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, the Rambam says that it is liftoach darkei tshuva, to open the doors of tshuva. Why? Why this difference? But the answer is, when there's an enemy at the door, usually, then we sometimes, unfortunately, have reached a level where that isn't always true anymore. When there's an enemy at the door, when there's pestilence, when there's a magefa, that's another situation where people somehow, for some reason, where it would be expected that they would be in contact with reality, lose contact with reality. So there, we don't have to recognize the problem. The problem is obvious. We have to get out of the problem. We appeal for God's help. But when it comes to Tisha B'Av, when it comes to Shabbos, Tammuz, Asar B'Teves, when it comes to focusing on Golos and exile, sometimes we don't even recognize the facts. We become oblivious to what is taking place. Sometimes the question is, who are you? And we start thinking that we are Americans, and it's important to be Americans. America was very good to the Jews, but we think of ourselves as Americans instead of thinking of ourselves as being Jewish. And we just think we don't even know who we are. And if we'll be asked, where are we? We'll say we're in our country. And it's true. America is our country. And America has been very good to us. But we cannot lose our connection. And unfortunately, so many of us, even in the most religious of circles today, are losing our connection with our historical home, Eretz Yisrael. And so there is the Golus, exile, in a sense, blocks us from recognizing reality, to see what it is. How many Jews made mistakes during World War II? And from the best of them, how many Jews just ignored the events that were taking place? So the Shavasa Tammuz, the Jewish people, what was the problem? They thought it was the 9th of Tammuz. Why? Because of what was taking place. They lost contact with reality. And it's important that we realize what happened, and to make sure that we do not repeat that same mistake. Now, it's very interesting. The pasuk in Zechariah says, Tzoma Revi v'Tzoma Chamishi V'tzom hashvi, v'tzom ha'asiri, yela beis Yehuda l'sasan ha'simcha. Tzom ha'revi, that's Shavas Tammuz. Tzom ha'chamishi, that's Tisha B'Av. Tzom ha'shvi, tzom Gedalia. V'tzom ha'asiri is Asara B'Teves. The pasuk says these fast days will be holidays of days of joy and happiness. And the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah asks the question, on one hand, you say it's fast days, and the other hand, you say it's days of joy and happiness and holidays. How do we resolve this contradiction? And the Gemara says, Bisman she'esh shalom, when there is peace, yiyul sasnul simcha, they will be days of joy. Now, what does that mean? Bisman, when there is gzeros, when there are decrees against the Jewish people, so then it's Som, then it's a fast day, an obligatory fast day. And Ein Shalom Ve'Ein Gzeros, in periods when there is no peace and there are no decrees against the Jewish people, Ratzu Misanim, Ratzu Ein Misanim. Those who want to fast can fast, and those who don't want to fast don't have to fast. And there are all kinds of opinions in explaining this Gemara. Now, according to most Rishonim, during the second Beis HaMikdash, during the second Commonwealth, after Ezra rebuilt the Beis HaMikdash, rebuilt the temple, and restored a small group of Jews, Eretz Yisrael from Babylonia. So during the second Beis HaMikdash, these fast days were days of simcha, they were days of joy, sasan v'simcha, they were holidays. After the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, however, so it depended. If there were gzeros, if there were decrees against the Jewish people, so then it was tzom, it was a required fast day. But if there was no gzeros, no decrees, but there was no shalom, no peace. Now what that means, we'll get to in a minute. So ratzu misanim, ratzu ein misanim. Most Rishonim say shalom. What does shalom mean? Shalom means so long as the Beis HaMikdash is in existence. So when the Beis HaMikdash was rebuilt, so it was Sasam V'Simcha, it was days of joy. It was a holiday. Shavas Tammuz, Asara B'Teves, and Som Gedalia were days of joy. One can ask the question, the being days of joy, there were days of joy because the Beis HaMikdash was rebuilt. But what does the word shalom? Why do we refer to the existence of the Beis HaMikdash as being days of peace? And I think the answer is very simple, because we see that when David HaMelech wanted to asked permission to build the Beis HaMikdash, it was at a time that he was at peace. He didn't have to worry, the Navi tells us, about enemies around him anymore. So from the Navi, it appears that a prerequisite for the building of the Beis HaMikdash is that there should be peace. And we could suggest that, so therefore, using the opportunity of peace to build the Beis HaMikdash is identified with Yesh Shalom. with there being peace. So however, after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, if there were xeros, if there were decrees, now why is the Beis Hamikdash have to be in a period when there's peace? Because we see that David HaMelech himself was not allowed to build a Beis Hamikdash. Why? Harbe dam shafachta. David was a man of war, milchemes mitzvah, but nevertheless it was war. And the Beis Hamikdash cannot be an edifice of war. It cannot be identified an edifice of war. You're not allowed to use metal to cut stones of the Mizbeach, because metal tends to end the life of man. Swords. Because the Beis Hamikdash has to be identified with life, not with the ending of life. So, and actually, the Yerushalmi says, how do we know that a Meshuach Muhammad, that a Kohen who was appointed as the Kohen for the war, who took care of the reading of the Parshas at the war, that he could eventually become a Kohen Gadol. And it brings a raya from Pinchas. The Yerushalmi brings a raya from Pinchas. And it seems if not for that proof, we would have said that a Meshuach Muhammad, one who was the Kohen who acted as the spiritual leader of the Jewish people going to war, could not become a Kohen Gadol. Why would have I thought such a thing? But the answer is the Kohen Gadol was in charge of the Beis Hamikdash. And the Meshuach Muhammad was in charge to a certain degree, spiritually in charge of the soldiers going to war. And one would say there is a contradiction in that. We don't want the Beis Hamikdash to be identified with war. So, Bisman Sheyeh Shalom, Beis Hamikdash, the mitzvah of building the Beis Hamikdash is at a time Bisman Sheyeh Shalom. And using that opportunity to build the Beis Hamikdash, the Gemara, according to many Rishonim, identifies as Yesh Shalom, as having peace. And I think now, but the question is, why is it that the celebration, because in the time when the Beis Hamikdash is in existence, so we celebrate on the days that are associated with the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. On the contrary, I would think that the holidays should be celebrated on the days that the Beis Hamikdash is rebuilt. Why is it that the holidays that will exist when the Beis Hamikdash is rebuilt, and according to most Rishonim, that existed during the Second Temple, was on those particular days that were associated with the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash? Seems very strange. But I think the answer might be, there are two possible answers. One answer is because these are days of tefillah, of crying out to God, of pleading with God to help us, of asking God to speedily rebuild the Beis Hamikdash and to return the Jewish people to Eretz Yisrael. So we want to acknowledge that the rebuilding, the returning of the Jewish people, and the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash was God's response to our prayers. So specifically those days that were identified as days of prayer to plead on behalf of the return of the Beis Hamikdash, of the temple, those days become the holidays commemorating the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash. But I think there might be another reason for it. And I think it's important to understand this reason. Sometimes people and institutions are taken for granted. I always say, Rashi, at the beginning of Vayetze Yaakov meber Sheva vayelech Harana. So Rashi says, Yitzia Tzaddik Osaroshem. When the tzaddik leaves, it makes an impression. Shekol zman shetzaddik be'er. For as long as the tzaddik is in the city, hu hada, hu ziva, hu hadara, he's the glory of the city. Yatsa misham, when he leaves, pana hada, pana ziva, pana hadara. The glory of the city leaves. And the question I always ask is, why is it that the Torah first tells us, Vayetze Yaakov left. So we say, Pana Hada, Pana Ziva, Pana Hadara. The glory left also. Avram left places. Torah doesn't say, Vayetze Avram. Why doesn't it say, Vayetze Avram, Pana Hada, Pana Ziva, Pana Hadara? The glory left when Avram left places. Vayetze Yitzchak, Yitzchak left places. The only place is Vayetze Yitzchak l'suach b'sadeh, to daven. But we don't say Pana Hada, Pana Ziva, Pana Hadara. But when it comes to Yaakov, we say Pana Hada, Vayetze Yaakov, Pana Hada, Pana Ziva, Pana Hadara. Why is it that way? But Yaakov was a ish tzaddik, ish tamim, yoshev olim. He was a person that sat in the tent. You have two types of tzaddikim. You have tzaddikim that sit in the tent. And in a sense, they're taken for granted. Their impact is not recognized. Not that it's not felt, but it's not recognized when they're there because they're withdrawn. And there are tzaddikim that, on the contrary, that you always recognize how important they are. Avram and Yitzchak, certainly Avram, as Rashi tells us, but even Yitzchak, Vayetze Yitzchak l'suach b'sadeh, according to some of the Mefarshim, that meant he went out of the tent to talk to people. And Avraham Yosef Pesach Oel. Avram sat at the entranceway to the Oel. He was always seeing who was passing by. People recognized who Avram was and who Yitzchak was. But Yaakov, up to that point, was a Yoshev Olim. It was a Yoshev Olim. People didn't recognize who he was. It was only after he left, that people recognize who was there in the first place. Sometimes we don't recognize the impact, the significance a person has if he's a Yoshev Olam, and only after he's gone, we recognize it. I want to just add, because this, on one hand, this is the idea behind the Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash, why is the celebration of having the Beis Hamikdash during Bayis Sheni and when Mashiach comes going to be on the days associated with the destruction? To emphasize the point that as a result of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, as a result of Golus, as a result of not having the Beis Hamikdash, the temple, for thousands of years. It's not only we didn't forget it, but it became even more important in our eyes. The loss made us recognize how great and how important the Beis Hamikdash was for us, for Klal Yisrael. So we celebrate the having of the Beis Hamikdash in that time. I just want to add, I said that this year is in memory of Reb Chaim Baruch Schreibman. He was a Yoshev Olim in the fullest meaning of the word. And sometimes it's when we have this Yoshev Olim that during his lifetime, he's not fully appreciated the way he should have been. But when he leaves, we could say, Pana Hada, Pana Hada, Pana Ziva, Pana Hadara. The glory of persons whose life was dedicated to Torah, whose whole interest in life was just the Torah. He was not interested in Olam Hazeh at all. And he did have a quite impact on people. But it'll only be fully recognized because it was Vayetze, Pana Hada, Pana Ziva, Pana Hadara. Now, so so this is the shita of the other Rishonim. However, the Rambam has an altogether different approach. The Rambam's approach is that in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, now there are two textual readings in the Rambam. I'm explaining it in accordance with the textual reading of Rav Yitzchak of Volozhiner, and from what I understand, even though the main Rambam text of the Rambam does not have it written that way, but most of the manuscripts, I think the Frankel Rambam points it out, does have it this way. The Rambam's shita seems to be, and this is somewhat in conformity with what he says in Perush HaMishnah. The Rambam's opinion is that during the time of the Beis Hamikdash, it was a time, according to the Rambam, Shalom is when Mashiach comes. That's the way everybody understands it. Shalom is when Mashiach comes. The Rambam says that the fast days will be holidays when Mashiach comes. The last halach in the Rambam in Hilchos Tainis. During the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, so the fasts were voluntary fasts. Ratzu misanim, ratzu ein misanim. Those who wanted to fast could fast, and those who didn't want to fast didn't have to fast. But the Rambam writes that Tisha B'Av, because there were so many tsaros that took place, and that's based on the Gemara. So many tsaros, so many catastrophes that took place. The first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. The second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, and that the Jewish people accepted upon themselves, even during the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, to fast on Tisha B'Av. But for the most part, the other fast days during the second Beis Hamikdash, they did not fast. When the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, so from the Rambam, according to Rav Yitzchak of Volozhin, as Gersa appears, we are required to fast all 4 fast days. It's not just something we decided to do, but we became required to fast all 4 fast days. And then when Mashiach comes, so all 4 fast days are going to be holidays. Now, the first question that one raises against the Rambam is, why do we fast when the Beis Hamikdash is in existence? Why should we fast on Tisha B'Av? And the other fast days are voluntary fast days. Why should there be voluntary fast days when the Beis Hamikdash is in existence? We're mourning the Churban, the destruction. The Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. And there are two answers, I think, that could be given. One answer was the answer my uncle gave. I saw in my uncle's name. He says the Jews knew. The Navi told them that the second Beis Hamikdash will be destroyed. As a matter of fact, the Ravid in Hilchos Beis Abchira mentions that Ezra, that's the Ravid's opinion, did not sanctify the Beis Hamikdash on a permanent basis because he knew that the second Beis Hamikdash will ultimately be destroyed. And my uncle said that they knew it would be destroyed on Tisha B'Av. So because of this, they fasted during they fasted on Tisha B'Av during the second Beis Hamikdash, that it shouldn't be destroyed at that time. Shouldn't be destroyed that year. It shouldn't be destroyed during their lifetime. Whatever it is, that it shouldn't be destroyed. Because they knew that destruction will take place on Tisha B'Av. And I guess the Ratzim Masanim, those who wanted to fast, the other fast days, they fasted for the same reason, but they didn't show, it wasn't accepted by Klal Yisrael because it wasn't going to be on that day. However, I think there's another reason that we could explain it. And that is, there is a machlokus, the two tochachas, one at the end of Vayikra and one at the end of Dvarim. The tochacha talks about the tragedies that are going to overtake the Jewish people, the punishments that will happen to them as a result of not observing the Torah. And two parshios really go into it in detail. In the end of Vayikra and at the end of Dvarim, in Kisavo. So the question is, why are there two parshios? So the Ramban says that at the end of Vayikra, that's talking about the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. And the end of Dvarim is talking about the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. The end of Vayikra is talking about the first exile. The end of Dvarim is talking about the second exile. However, the Abarbanel disagrees. And the Abarbanel says the two tochachas overlap each other. And the Abarbanel suggests, goes a step further, and he says the truth is that even during the second Beis Hamikdash, they were still in exile, but it was a lull in the exile. So in other words, the second Commonwealth was not an end to the exile that the Jewish people had, that the Jewish people underwent during at the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. But it was a lull in that exile. So to a certain degree, the Jewish people were still in Golus during the second Beis Hamikdash. So because of that, it was appropriate to fast on Tisha B'Av, and there would be even a mitzvah to fast in the other fast days if the Jewish people had chosen to do so. So that's now. That's the sheet of the Rambam. Now, however, the problem with the Rambam is that according to the Rambam, so when was it Ratzu Misanim, Ratzu Ein Misanim? When did they have the choice? That's when the Beis Hamikdash was in existence. When the Beis Hamikdash was not in existence, so they were required to fast. So the question, and I think this question, if my memory serves me correctly, was asked by the Mishkan Yaakov. So according to the Rambam, they were only holidays. And when Mashiach comes, in fact, they were never holidays. They were only holidays. The 4 fast days were only holidays when Mashiach comes. So we can understand that logically. Logically, it's not a problem because Bisman Sheyeh Shalom, peace, there isn't going to be a real peace until Mashiach comes. Bakei Shalom v'Radfehu. My grandfather used to say, peace. It's not a real peace. You have to search it out. Bakei Shalom doesn't mean search for the peace, but search out the peace. Make sure the peace is a true peace. Then go after it. We always talk about peace. And peace is the answer for everything. In order for peace, we give up on all principles. How many times were peace treaties made with the terrorists? And how many times were Jews killed in buses being bombed, in buses, in bombs being placed where there are carriages for little babies? But you have the fools that continuously say, peace, peace, peace. Peace. Bakei Shalom, make sure it's peace. Then Rafehu. Impulsive people. They're not Bakei. They just run after it. So we can understand very simple the why Bisman Sheyeh Shalom is when Mashiach comes. However, the problem is that the Rambam himself, the Gemara says that Tzom Gedalia during Bayis Sheni was a holiday. Now, according to the Rambam, how could we say it was a holiday? It will only be a holiday when Mashiach comes. The Rambam himself says that on the other fast days, during the time of Bayis Sheni, during the time of the Beis Hamikdash, there was a mitzvah to fast. The Jews chose not to fast except on Tisha B'Av. But but it couldn't be a holiday. It means there was reason to fast, as I explained. So how could we see it as being a holiday? But I think the reason it's a holiday, now Rashi says, what does it mean, Yesh Shalom? What does it mean when there's peace? It's a holiday. Rashi says, Yad Yisrael Tkifa, when the hand of the Jews is in control. In other words, from Rashi, it appears that even during the second Beis Hamikdash, there were times when it wasn't times of peace. There was, the Beis Hamikdash was in existence, but there wasn't that sense of security. Shalom, when we say Bisman Sheyeh Shalom, it means not only that the edifice of Shalom is being built, the edifice that shows that the Jewish people are at peace, the edifice that causes peace between Klal Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But Bisman Sheyeh Shalom means when we have a sense of security concerning the Beis Hamikdash. But if we are insecure about the existence of the Beis Hamikdash, and perhaps even more than that, we are insecure about the Jewish people being close to the Beis Hamikdash. Shavasa B'Tammuz actually is when they broke through the walls of the Beis Hamikdash. They broke through the walls The enemy was in Yerushalayim. They were doing havoc in Yerushalayim, killing people in Yerushalayim, making it impossible to live in Yerushalayim. And Yerushalayim is really part of the Beis HaMikdash. And to a certain degree, through Yerushalayim, it's the Jewish people and HaKadosh Baruch who reside. It's expressive of the idea of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Jewish people residing together. V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'socham, and I will dwell in their midst. So the Zman Sheyeh Shalom is not just that we have the Beis HaMikdash, but Zman Sheyeh Shalom is that when we have a secure feeling about the existence of the Beis HaMikdash. And it seems to me, if we don't have a secure feeling about the continued existence of the Beis HaMikdash, if we're always under the impact, the Beis HaMikdash could be destroyed at any moment and any day. We couldn't celebrate the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash. When can we celebrate the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash? That's only when the Beis HaMikdash, when we have a secure feeling of the continued existence of the Beis HaMikdash. But if it's not Yad Yisrael Kifa, if there are foreign governments in charge who have disdain for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, have disdain for the Jewish people, and they have disdain for the Jewish religion, so we can't have a secure feeling. How could we celebrate when we know at any moment the Beis HaMikdash might be destroyed? So I think that perhaps we could suggest that there were different periods of time during the second Beis HaMikdash. There were periods of time in the second Beis HaMikdash, and perhaps those were not the greater amount of years, according to the Rambam, when there was a certain sense of security. And because of that, it could be even according to the Rambam, during those few years, those periods of a few years, perhaps immediately after the time of the Hashmonaim, I don't know, because there were a lot of problems then also. There were short periods of time when, in addition to having the Beis HaMikdash, there was security. And we didn't have to worry that the Beis HaMikdash could be destroyed at any day. So then it was Bizman Sheyeh Shalom also. But unfortunately, most of the years of the Beis HaMikdash, it wasn't Yad Yisrael Tkifa. There were periods when the Greeks were in charge. There were periods when the Romans were in charge. There were periods when they were when they were dependent upon other kings as well, somewhat the better periods. So it wasn't always Bizman Sheyeh Shalom. So the Rambam could agree that there were short periods of time, even during Bayis Sheni, during the second Beis HaMikdash, that there was holidays. But there were many periods of time when there were no holidays, that it was insecure. And then the Beis HaMikdash was in existence, but they didn't have that sense of security. When you don't have that sense of security, to a certain degree, you feel the golus, you feel the exile. By Yesheni, there was a lull in the golus, but there are periods of time you still felt the feelings of golus. And when you feel the feelings of golus, you cannot, when you have those feelings of golus, the emotions of golus, it's difficult to celebrate about the existence of the Beis HaMikdash. So then, but on the other hand, the Beis Hamikdash is there. So according to the Rambam, it was Ratzu Misanim, Ratzu Ein Misanim. And I think this is the idea. Shavasa Tammuz represents the psychological trauma. The psychological trauma is that even though the Beis Hamikdash is in existence, but we sense the impending doom, the impending destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. We feel the gullus even when the Beis Hamikdash is there. And so Shavasa B'Tammuz reminds us it's not enough. Of course, we look forward to the Beis Hamikdash, but we're looking forward to the Beis Hamikdash being rebuilt with security. And it's important for us to understand that until we have that security, and that security we will only have, obviously, when Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, the security will be a permanent security, and the 4 fast days will become permanent holidays. During the second Beis Hamikdash, there were isolated years that the war holidays. But when Mashiach comes, it'll be the 4 fast days will be permanent holidays, because then we will recognize and we will appreciate how important the Beis Hamikdash is to us and how important it always was for us. Okay.
Okay, please put questions in the chat. So someone asked, but according to most Rishonim, in the time of the first Beis Hamikdash, or even the second, when it was being
First Beis Hamikdash, no, it's nothing to talk about. They didn't have Tisha B'Av.
I meant the second Beis Hamikdash. Let's say before Hanukkah, when they didn't have the Beis Hamikdash.
It's a question. What was according to the Rishonim, it's discussed. I think they say that at that point, it certainly was not a yontif. It certainly was not a yontif, and whether they fasted on that time or not, they don't know. That's. But it certainly was not a yontif according to those Rishonim at that point, because it might have been even a form of destruction. It's not just that they didn't have it; it might have been a minor form of destruction.
Anyone else have any questions? A few thank yous, Yesher Koach.
Okay.
That's any other questions? So thank you very much. An easy fast, everyone, except if anyone's here from Israel, probably just about over. So.
Okay.
Yeah, have a good week, everyone.
You were good.
Yeah, thank you.